for this? We saw the statements, but what's getting done to really implement change in that respect?
Well, MJ, first, thank you for being here, and thank all of you. You're right. Last year we were talking about the same subject, which is part of the frustration I think all of us have ultimately. And I think I'd start with the basis that racism or any form of discrimination is against our values and really something that we will not tolerate. So, let's take Coach Flores' litigation and put that to the side. Let's talk of really, that will go through the legal process. It's really more important to talk about what Coach Flores was talking about and other coaches have talked about with respect to what really is happening in the hiring process. What's good, what's bad, what's not leading us to the results that we expect to have. We have spent an extraordinary amount of time with our committees, particularly our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, but also with our membership in general, to sort of talk about the process. I think we made a tremendous amount, a lot of progress in a lot of areas, but not at the head coach. And that is something that is something we really have focused on to try to get the kind of results that we would expect. And we fell short of that by a long shot for us.
Where do you find, or where do you think the disparity lies in getting these candidates, very qualified candidates, which we've seen throughout the NFL, not only into the room, but actually getting these jobs and retaining these jobs?
Well, they are getting into the room, and they're getting the interviews. In fact, they're exceeding anything in the Rooney Rule as far as the interviews. It's what we want to try to see is the outcomes, right? We want to see black head coaches in the NFL and coaches of people of color. And eventually gender, that we think is all important. So it's an inclusive process and hopefully an inclusive outcome. And I think, so what we're going to do is step back and look at everything we're doing to date, reevaluate that, everything from looking at the Rooney Rule and seeing what changes should be made to that, if any changes, or should it be removed, which some people have suggested. All of those things are part of that. We're going to talk to other people, have independent people come in and look and help us evaluate it, because it's sometimes hard to evaluate your own policies and procedures, and make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to create that opportunity for everybody, to make sure that we are an inclusive league and make sure we get the outcomes we want. And that our policies really, truly are effective with outcomes.
You mentioned the frustration earlier, and this will be my last question before I open up to the press crew. When you have to constantly address the issues of diversity and inclusion and hiring practices, what's the message to the folks who work within the league, who are living that, who are in it every single day?
Well, I think there is no finish line with diversity and inclusion. I think that's something that constantly we have to keep at the forefront of everything we do. It makes us better. It makes us bring the best talent into the league. And I think we made a tremendous amount of progress in a lot of areas, particularly with the head coaches. We have more work to do, and we've got to figure that out. But I think that's what the NFL does well. I think, and I said this earlier this week, to me, this is an opportunity for us to step back, look at what we're doing, look what we should be doing, and how we can lead to better results. And all of our employee base is part of that. Our clubs are part of that. Outside experts are part of that. And all of that hopefully will lead us to a better place. And frankly, something that we know we have to do better at. We need to set our minds to it and get it done.
Let's open it up to everyone in the audience. I know someone's coming around with a microphone, correct? You say your name and your affiliate as well,
Barry Wilner, Associated Press. Roger, I want to play off a little bit what you're just talking about. Do you think that it's possible that the interview process itself is flawed and it's unfair to minorities? And if so, how concerned are you about that, and how could that be fixed, and what will the league do to try to fix that? Thanks.
Well, Barry, I think one of the things that we shouldn't do is draw any conclusions without really looking at that. I don't think you take anything off the table until you've had people look at that, help us independently to say, is there something flawed with our process? And if there is, what can we do to resolve that and fix that? So for me to sit here and say, I know something, if I knew something was flawed with our process in any area, we would be addressing it. And we've made a lot of changes in the last few years to try to address things that we thought could be helpful. one of the big things that we've discussed and I think was helpful in the process was our database. And developing a database that had a tremendous amount of information in there for the clubs as they began the process. We've also obviously also looked at what aspects of the process we want to formulate through our policies. But that all has to be looked at and what else we can do to make it better. And I don't take anything off the table, Barry. If that's something that I think outside experts will be helpful to us in making sure that something we thought we were doing well, maybe we're not doing so well. And hopefully that'll help us get to a better solution.
Hi, Roger. Sam Farmer, Los Angeles Times. We're sitting here at the new NFL media headquarters across the street from a $5 billion stadium, and seems to comport with all the checklist that you laid out in your 2012 memo about returning to Los Angeles. And it's not been without its challenges, obviously, but I wonder what is next for Los Angeles. What's a realistic time frame for? I know you got to get through this Super Bowl, but the next Super Bowl is 4 years a realistic time frame for a second Super Bowl at SoFi?
Well, Sam, it's sort of great that we're sitting here, as you say, in the backdrop of the stadium and the media center, and as you know, you lived it a lot of with us over the years. It did come up with a lot of ups and downs. Losing two teams from the NFL in the 90s was a difficult period for us and our fans, and I think something that we worked really hard to resolve, but we really wanted to find the right solution. And one of the things I'm really confident about sitting here and feeling it this week is that we really landed in the right spot. We have a state-of-the-art stadium, which I think reflects this great community and the entertainment capital of the world. It's now has two NFL teams playing here, which I think has been extraordinarily successful in reestablishing two teams here. And then we have what I think is really the ultimate event, which is a Super Bowl here. And so, to me, it's sort of surreal that we're here in many ways after all these years, 29 years since we had our last Super Bowl. But I think this is going to be a regular Super Bowl stop because one of that stadium, which we've always said, as you know, and you mentioned the 2012 memo, it really started with the stadium. We needed to have a state-of-the-art stadium that gave us the wow factor, that gave us the ability to put on these big events and, frankly, attract other events other than the Super Bowl. So that's something that we don't have a Super Bowl until 60. That would be the earliest we would consider LA. But I'd be hard-pressed to think that they're not going to be at the top of everybody's list every opportunity we can.
Jason Reed, ESPN. Roger, the league quickly came out after Coach Flores filed his lawsuit and said his claims were without merit. But then on Saturday, in a memo to all the clubs, you made it clear that you understand Coach Flores' concerns and the concerns of others. Can you understand why fans are confused by those two positions? And could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, it's a good question, which I've asked in our office, and we've talked about it. I think the initial reaction was regarding the legal claims themselves and not really what we would say the experiences of what Coach Flores was going through. And that's what I'm more interested in. I put the legal claims and the legal process to the side, and that'll be handled by lawyers. To me, it's more important for us to sort of listen to Coach, understand what he and other coaches are going through, what our clubs are going through, what the feedback they have, and also, again, reevaluate everything we're doing. Let's see, are we making mistakes that we subconsciously are doing or didn't think was a mistake? We have to reopen to every one of those. And so, I admire and respect Coach a lot, and so I hope we'll get a lot of feedback, not just from Coach Flores, but everybody in this league. That's what's going to make us better.
If I may do a quick follow on this question. So I love that Jason mentioned sort of the two messages there. And you talk about reevaluation, Commissioner. At what point do you start looking at the potential of an overhaul in how things are doing once those evaluations are done?
Well, MJ, I'd go back to, I think, the question previous that you don't take anything off the table. So if it requires an overhaul, you do it. If it requires changes in other areas, you do it. I think, obviously, we haven't been successful to date, so we've got to look at every one of those alternatives. And so, and we're going to have other people look at it with us, independently with us, and independently as well as with us, and bring those ideas.
Max Silke from Germany, Pro 7. Mr. Goodell, as you maybe can imagine, there's a big topic in Germany besides the Super Bowl. It's the game in Germany, which happens next season. In the last 2 days, there have been a lot of talking, a lot of rumors about where it's going to happen. Can you give us a little update about this?
Yes. You know, we're very proud of our international regular season game series. We have been exploring, as you know, and that's, I think, a lot of the talk you're talking about, playing in Germany for our first regular season game. And we're thrilled. We're going to be going to Munich next year to be playing this season, 2022. We'll be playing at the Bayern Munich Stadium, and we're thrilled to be there. We think it'll be a fantastic experience for us. We'll also be playing another game over the next 4 years at Munich, and we'll also be playing 2 games at Frankfurt. So over the next 4 years, we'll have 4 different games in Germany, 2 in Munich and 2 in Frankfurt, and we're really excited about it.
Hi, Commissioner. Luis Martinez from 2DN. Sadly, because of the pandemic, the NFL has not been able to come back to Mexico recently. Is the league able to confirm now that for next season there's going to be a game at Azteca Stadium? And if so, can you tell us about the teams?
Yeah, we were disappointed not to be able to come to Mexico last year. We just felt from a safety standpoint it wasn't the right decision. We made that with our partners in Mexico. And we're excited to say we're going to be back. We've talked with the partners, with the public officials, and so we will be back in Mexico at Azteca Stadium probably around the same time, November of next year. This year, sorry, next season.
Roger, Mark Maskey from the Washington Post. What is your reaction to the new allegations of sexual misconduct made directly against Dan Snyder during the congressional roundtable? And also, how do you account for the fact that the team announced this morning that it would conduct its own investigation, and then the league subsequently announced that the league would handle the investigation and not the team?
Well, a couple of things, Mark. Listen, you know, the roundtable did bring forward another witness that spoke about her experience with Washington. I think we treat that very seriously, and we need to look into that. We'll obviously do an investigation. We've said that from day one, that we will look into this and do an investigation. We need to understand what really truly happened in those circumstances and treat that in the best and most serious way we can to make sure we preserve the type of culture we want in the NFL. I do not see any way that a team can do its own investigation of itself. That's something that we would do. We would do it with an outside expert that would be able to help us come to the conclusion of what the facts were and what really truly happened, so that we can make the right decision from there. So we'll treat that seriously and move forward.
Hi, Roger. I'm Nikki with the Washington Post. Why did the league enter into a common interest agreement with Dan Snyder regarding the Beth Wilkinson report? And did Dan Snyder try to block any of the findings from that report being released?
Yeah, that was something we responded to the committee, I think, last Friday, and reaffirmed that, I think, is in the last 24 hours to let everyone know that that's a legal agreement. I cannot explain all that. Our people will, but it did not interfere with anything that we did with respect to the Washington investigation and the outcome of the Washington investigation. We controlled that independently of the team, and we did that with an outside expert, as you know, Beth Wilkinson, who did a great job on that and a thorough job on that, and we appreciate the work that she did on that.
Hey, Roger, Jim Trotter. The question is more for the owners, but also for you, and since they're not here, I'll ask you, as I always say. In your initial statement, the league's initial statement, it said that diversity, equity, and inclusion were core principles of the NFL. And I need to provide some context before I can ask you about that statement. In the 100-plus year history of this league, 24 of the 32 franchises have either had one black head coach or no black no black head coaches. And to make sure I get the names right, I'll read them off here. We've got the Bills, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Falcons, the Giants, the Jaguars, the Panthers, the Patriots, the Rams, the Ravens, the Saints, the Seahawks, the Titans, who have never had a black head coach. That's nearly half the league. We look at the fact that there's never been a majority black owner. There's only been one black club president. We look at the GMs, now we're up to 7. 5 of those were hired in the last 12 months. We're now at 3 black head coaches, 2 of whom were hired after Brian Flores filed his lawsuit. So it's easy to focus on the owners here, but I want to put this to you here. When we look at the league office, of the top 11 executives there are only 2 people of color. When we look at NFL Media Group, where I work, there is not one black person at the senior level in the newsroom who makes decisions about a league whose player population is 70% black. So as a member of the media group and as a black man, I ask, why does the NFL and its owners have such a difficult time at the highest levels hiring black people into decision-making positions?
Yeah, Jim, listen, we look at the same numbers, and they're really part of the effort that, again, looking at how do we become more effective in our policies and procedures. We work really hard. We believe in diversity. We believe in it as a value. We believe it's made it stronger. People who've come into the league who are diverse have been very successful and made us better. And we just have to do a better job. We have to look, is there another thing that we can do to make sure we're attracting that best talent here and making our league inclusive? If I had the answer right now, I would give it to you. I would have implemented it. I think what we have to do is just continue and find and look and step back and say, we're not doing a good enough job here. We need to find better solutions and better outcomes. And so let's find more effective policies. Let's make sure everyone understands. Let's make sure that we're looking at diversity and actually incentivizing that for everybody in our building, including with compensation. Let's make sure that when we're dealing with vendors outside the building, we're hiring diverse vendors and bringing them in and giving them an opportunity to succeed just like we do with white vendors or people of color. Well, how can they come in and contribute to the NFL? So I think it's not a single answer, Jim. The single responsibility comes on all of us in the NFL, and we have to be the ones that make that change, and we are the ones that have to make sure we bring diversity deeper into our NFL and make the NFL an inclusive and diverse organization that allows everyone the opportunity to be successful. Yes, Jim.
Sal Palantonio, ESPN. Roger, part of Brian Flores' allegations was that he was offered money to tank games by Stephen Ross, the Miami Dolphins owner. When you heard about that, how troubling was that to you, knowing you're obviously protective of the integrity of the game? How serious are you into investigating this and making sure that this investigation is transparent, the results are transparent to the fans out there so that they know that the game is being protected? And if you find a coach or a member of the front office or a player or an owner who engages in such activity, what would the discipline be?
Well, a couple things. First, Sal, let me step back and say I found all of the allegations, whether they were based on racism or discrimination or the integrity of our game, all of those, to me, were very disturbing. They are very serious matters to us on all levels, and we need to make sure we get to the bottom of all of them. Integrity of the game is obviously an important element, just as making sure we have the right culture in our organizations across the league and at clubs. But we are going to look into that, and we will make sure that if there were violations, that they won't be tolerated. I couldn't speculate on what they'll be because we'll have to find out what the facts are. What's the outcome? And when we know what those facts are and the impact it has on our game, we'll deal with it very seriously, just as we will if there is any discrimination in the league. They will be dealt with very seriously.
Commissioner Jane Wells, CNBC. Two follow-ups. One, are the owners, is there a rule where the other owners could vote an owner out and force him to lose the franchise? And the second is, following up on owners, Byron Allen is interested in potentially purchasing the Broncos. Are the other owners doing anything to facilitate a black owner?
Yes. Let me take your first question. I'll probably have to make sure I understand my own authority in here, and Jeff Pash will have to follow me. But I do believe that the clubs do have the authority to remove an owner from the league. Ultimately, it's a league vote, I believe. We'll correct that if I'm incorrect. On your second point, yes, and I have been personally involved with this for about 3 decades now, of attracting minority owners, particularly black owners, into the league in an ownership position. We have met with Byron a couple of times, and both myself personally, as well as other people of our staff. He is not the only individual that's interested in buying an NFL team that is black, and we have worked hard to make sure we have as many candidates possible and put them in a position to succeed. So explaining our policies, our ownership rules, what we can do to make sure they are best prepared to enter into the process of acquiring a franchise and have a full understanding of what it will take to do that, both financially and from a policy standpoint.
Hey, Roger. Ben Volen from the Boston Globe. Remarkably, for the 8th straight year, I have a question about Deflategate to ask you. There was a report from Mike Florio last week that the NFL expunged the data from the PSI spot check data from the 2015 season after Deflategate. One, do you have any comment on that? And two, don't you think that the fans, the Patriots, Tom Brady, maybe deserve to see the results of those spot checks?
Ben, this is a long time since I've thought about Deflategate, other than maybe your last question last year. I don't know, but we were very clear that we were going to do spot checks to make sure that people were following the policies. That is something that we fully engaged in, and I don't know what happened to the data, to be honest with you. We don't look back at that. We just make sure there's no violations. That's the purpose of the spot checks. Are there violations? And if there are violations, we need to look into it. But thankfully, we did not see any.
Hi, Catherine Fitzgerald with the Buffalo News. With the Buffalo Bills' ongoing stadium financing negotiations with New York State, it's about 6 weeks past the team's preferred deadline of December 31st and only about 6 weeks to the next owners' meetings. What's your level of urgency and concern with those negotiations?
Well, I'm encouraged by the progress that's being made, both at the state level, the county level, and with the club. We have been involved in a lot of those discussions. The governor has stepped into a very difficult challenge, because when she came into office, not only is the lease up in another year, but the stadium has been studied by experts, and it's reaching the useful life of that stadium. It probably has no more than 5 years, according to many of those studies. The bottom line on it is we have to get a new stadium in Buffalo. The governor has recognized that. It's got to be a public-private partnership. All parties are going to have to work together. That means the state, the county, the team, and the NFL to be able to achieve that. She's shown great leadership in bringing the parties together, looking how to do that. We have shared as much as we can with all parties. But there's a lot to negotiate here, not just how this is done, but also the lease. So I'm not disappointed in the timing necessarily. I'm more interested in making sure that we balance everything fairly, and we put ourselves in the best position of really giving the fans what they deserve in Western New York, which is a stadium that's new and that can serve the purposes of that community for several decades.
Vinny Montior with the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Roger, over here. There was an incident involving Alvin Kamara in Las Vegas prior to the Pro Bowl, and I was just wondering if the league was aware via police that there was a situation prior to the game, and was there any consideration to not playing him in the game? And secondly, there have been some incidents in Las Vegas involving the NFL and NFL players. Is that something that the league feels is part of the environment of Las Vegas, or just individuals making bad decisions?
Well, we talk a lot about personal conduct. that applies to all of us, not just players, but applies to every individual, including yours truly. And that is about making good decisions. And unfortunately, good decisions, bad decisions also happen in other markets. So I don't look at anything specific to Las Vegas here. On your specific question, our security team was contacted by the police in Las Vegas just prior to the game, saying they would like to meet with Alvin after the game, and our team made sure that that happened. So our security team did what they were asked to do and accommodated that.
Ben Fisher, Sports Business Journal. Roger, in regard to this new investigation, I'd say it is that's been announced into Washington.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
In regard to the new investigation that's been announced into the allegations against Dan Snyder in Washington, does the league intend to enter into a common interest agreement with the team in regard to that investigation? And related, is it possible, in your opinion, for one party of a common interest agreement to legitimately investigate the other party of a common interest agreement regarding the facts at issue in said agreement?
Well, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I will tell you that my understanding of it from my standpoint is that a common interest agreement was used the first time because the actual investigation was started with the Washington Football Club. And there was a transfer from the Washington Football Club to the NFL. And so that was part of, and as I understand it, something that's done on a common basis to make sure that that is transferred from one to another. But our attorneys will be better to answer that than I am. But that's how I understand it.
Hi, Phil Schuman with Fox 11 here in Los Angeles. Two questions. First, on behalf of our colleagues in Washington, is it accurate that the NFL struck a deal with Dan Snyder to not release their report on workplace harassment until he signs off on it? And secondly, when you talk about the issues of diversity and inclusion, you make it sound like this is the first time you've been aware of it. You've been commissioner for 15 years. Do you not bear some personal responsibility for not having made more progress?
The answer is yes, I do. And I think we started it off by saying we were talking about the same subject last year. And I've said many times that as a league, I don't think there's a subject we've discussed more frequently in the ownership over the last 4 or 5 years. It has been at every league meeting other than 2. And that is something that we all have to bear responsibility for. Me as commissioner also. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to be more successful, more effective. So yes, I do bear that responsibility as well as all our clubs. And the other question I think was, did we did not make a deal with Dan Snyder to release or have his approval before we released any information, no.
Roger over here. Hi. The earlier investigation into the Washington football team, the findings were delivered orally and very little detail was provided publicly. It was just a summary. Can you say now, with this new investigation starting, will there be a written report and will it be released to the public?
Well, Judy, let's go back for a second because I think it's important to note when the investigation originally happened, we wanted to make sure that any employee or anyone who had anything to offer about what was happening in the Washington Football Club could come forward and do that on a confidential basis if that's how they preferred. Some have chosen that they'd be willing to go public. We saw those witnesses last week in Congress, and there are others. But the vast majority of the people who participated did it knowing that they would not have their names presented publicly. And that's really important in an investigation, and an integrity of an investigation is to give them that ability. Otherwise, you're not going to get the information you really want. So we made that pledge to those employees. If you wanted to come forward and keep your identities confidential, we would do that. And that was the core reason why the report was given to us orally. We summarized that report. We accepted all of the recommendations that our independent investigator had with respect to the workplace in Washington Football Club. We also put in, as you know, not just the discipline against the team because we felt that the environment and the culture there was toxic, but they made a lot of changes as an organization. They made the additional changes that Beth had recommended. And more importantly, we put in a system of checks and audits to make sure that the changes that they made were retained and that they're continuing to be effective in the organization. And we just got an audit last week, by chance, that demonstrates that actually they are working. And that's really where we want to be. We want to be in an organization where everyone can come and work there free of harassment, free of discrimination, and make sure that we have the infrastructure to be able to deal with it when it does happen. And make sure that the club or the league is responsible for making sure they act promptly and respectfully so that people can be there and work in the right kind of environment that encourages people to be successful and take advantage of opportunities.
Hi, Lindsay Jones from The Athletic. A two-part question here. What is the timeline for the sale of the Denver Broncos? And given what you've talked about with the commitment to diversity and inclusion, what sort of checks and balances are in place that this new owner, aside from having the financial capital to purchase this team, also shares in the responsibility of promoting diversity in this league?
Well, first, Lindsay, to that last point in the question that came up before, we would love to see a diverse owner of the team, whether that's a person of color or a female or a black man. We think that would be a really positive step for us and something that we've encouraged. And one of the reasons we've reached out to find candidates who can do that. There is no timetable. The Denver Broncos are selling the team, not the NFL. We would have approval rights. But I think we'll be very clear, and we have already with the Broncos, that is something that we certainly would seek to have in the ownership group. And we will certainly try to encourage that as the process goes along. But I don't know what the timetable. I would expect it to be happening before the start of the next season.
Hey, Roger, Jonathan Jones, CBS Sports. You've talked about finding more effective policies. You've talked about not taking anything off the table, talking to outside experts, et cetera. If these qualified black coaches can get in the room, as you say, to record numbers, but you as a collective league are falling short, I'm sort of left to draw only one conclusion. And what's the league's plan to address bias, prejudice, and racism among the NFL team owners?
Well, I think we've been very clear, and I tried to say it up front. We won't tolerate racism. We won't tolerate discrimination. If there are policies that we need to modify, we're going to do that. We will absolutely do it. If we've seen evidence of discrimination, we will deal with that in a very serious way that would reflect the fact that we won't tolerate it. And I think our clubs understand that from all the discussions we've had. I believe it's part of their values. I believe that's what they're doing. They're operating on that. We have to make sure, though, that we're doing everything we can to encourage them to have the right processes to lead to the right outcomes.
Hello, Commissioner. My name is Aubrey Anaya. I'm the Super Kid, and I would like to ask my question. My question is, which players have you seen do great in community, just really, and what have you really seen them doing in the community that really stood out to you?
Aubrey, I think if I understood all of it was the importance of our players, what they do in their communities, what stands out amongst their work. And I would say a couple things. First, our players are extraordinary. And I know everyone thinks about what they do on the field, but they're really incredible young men. What they do on the field, most of them are out in their communities constantly trying to make a difference in their communities. And I think they deserve our recognition of that. So Walter Payton is one that comes to my mind. Unfortunately, Walter left us all too soon. And what happened is that we were able to use his legacy to create the Walter Payton Man of the Year and to use that to recognize the work of all of our great players and what they're doing. And it is, to me, the most significant award that we have in the league. I think it's the most important because it recognizes them not just as players, but more importantly as men. and what their families are doing. And it's one of the hardest jobs is to vote for a single person to do that because they're incredible. So I couldn't pick out one. We'll be picking out a Man of the Year tomorrow night. And that person will be very deserving. I'm sure of that because all 32 of the ones that will be here tomorrow night are deserving.
Evan Novi-Williams from Sportico. Roger, you've spoken in the past about a target of hitting $25 billion in revenue by 2027. In the past year, you've signed a new round of TV deals. You have a better sense, I would think, of how COVID has affected league finances. Are you on track with that? Are you ahead of schedule? Are you behind schedule? Can you give us an update on that number?
Well, we really don't look at that number as the objective, honestly. When we look at how we want the league to grow, we measure it in a lot of different ways. Most importantly, the fan base itself. How are we growing the game on a global basis? We expect to have close to 200 million fans here in the United States, but our real objective is how do we grow the game globally. So, when we see the growth of the league going forward, I see opportunities in the media platform that are really important to us, particularly direct to consumer. We have our core media deals done, but we have a lot of other media opportunities that will allow us to reach those fans, whether they're here in the States or on a global basis, and directly. I've often said there's never been a better time to be a fan, and that's because of the technology to do that and our content. And we've seen the value of our content. If you look what's happening to ratings around the league, more and more people are watching NFL football because of the quality of the game. We've had extraordinary games this year, an extraordinary season, and that content is even more valuable. So to me, it's really focusing on how do we share our game with more people and build that. The revenue follows that. That's not the driver. What's the driver is how do we get more fans and how do we engage them more with the opportunities that we have.
Thank you, D. Orlando Ledbetter of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Roger. There was one column last week by Cyrus Murray, formerly of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, that said, hey, when the Raiders hired John Gruden, that pretty much killed the Rooney Rule, allowed teams to carry on with the sham, quote-unquote, sham interviews. Where are we at with strengthening or discarding or coming up with a new form of policy to help the minority hiring process? And secondly, after Super Bowl 53 in Atlanta, where are they at? Where is the city at in getting back in line for another one?
Well, you have an interested party here in the front row that you can ask about when they want to get in line, but I assume he wants to get in line pretty quickly. So I'll let Mr. Blank answer that. And I'd also go back, part of our work has been done with the Fritz Pollard Alliance. They're an independent body. We don't agree on everything, but they have been extraordinary in helping us look at policies. The Rooney Rule, as an example, has changed many times over. I think we're on at least 5 or 6 changes, which is a good thing in the sense of how it evolves, how it has to change to address the issues that we are facing today. And I think that's the core of the message that we've been talking about here is, okay, we're not having the success we want with head coaches. How do we evolve that rule? Or do we have to have a new rule? Do we need to figure out some other way of being able to achieve that outcome? And I think we're not going to rest until we find that. And we get those kind of outcomes that I think are, they're mandatory for us. There just has to be the way we're going to move forward to have an inclusive league.
Okay, that will conclude today's session. We want to thank you, MJ, Commissioner, and everyone for being here. D. Smith will be coming up right after, 1 o'clock. And we'll have a quick moment if the Commissioner can just take a picture here.